Like a backstage pass to the world of fly fishing travel, this is Waypoints, the podcast of destination angling. News and events, helpful travel tips, destination profiles, great stories, and expert advice from some of the most seasoned and experienced names in fishing travel. Waypoints is presented by Yellow Dog Fly Fishing, the industry's #1 specialty travel company and the fly shop for the world of fly fishing. Freshwater or saltwater, international or domestic, Yellow Dog has you covered for your next fishing adventure. And now your host, author, photographer, and world traveler, Jim Klug.
Permit fishing has a way of humbling even the most confident anglers. It's a fish that demands patience, discipline, and an acceptance that you're likely to fail far more often than you succeed. And that's exactly why so many of us are obsessed with these fish. Back in 2019, more than 7 years ago, I sat down for a Waypoints episode with legendary permit angler, guide, and lodge owner, WIL FLACK. Will was one of our very first guests here on Waypoints, way back in episode 8. And in that initial conversation, we talked about feeding permit, fly selections, tactics on the flats, and the fundamentals of chasing a fish that many anglers cynically refer to as the black-tailed devil. At the time, Will had already spent nearly 2 decades guiding and fishing in Belize. He's the founder of Belize Permit Club and Tres Pescados Fly Shop, and he's widely regarded as one of the most knowledgeable people in the sport when it comes to permit behavior and how these fish feed. But if there's one thing anyone who chases permit understands, it's this. No one, and I mean absolutely no one, ever truly figures permit out. And from my perspective, the anglers who claim that they have are usually the ones who haven't spent enough time chasing them. Looking back on episode 8, I realized that a lot has changed since that early conversation with Will. Gear, fly lines, rod technology, fly design, pressure on the flats, and even the way anglers approach permit fishing. And Will himself would probably be the first person to say that his thinking has evolved quite a bit over the last 7 years. So today, we're revisiting permit fishing with fresh eyes, 7 years after our last episode. What's changed? What still matters just as much as it always did? And what has Will learned? Sometimes the hard way, after many more years and thousands more shots at permit since the last time we talked. The Waypoints podcast is brought to you by Patagonia. To bring their gear to life, Patagonia is motivated by relentless curiosity and a passion for the wild. They evaluate hundreds of materials, build dozens of prototypes, and spend seasons punishing them in the world's most extreme conditions. The work is the guide, and Patagonia never tires of exploring, learning, and improving. The all-new River Salt 2 wading boot is an incredible product that solves key issues for anglers in both salt and freshwater environments. These new boots are lightweight, fast-drying, and built to perform across a full range of conditions, from mountain streams to tropical flats. Best of all, they are designed for speed, so you can slip them on and have them laced and ready to go in seconds. They combined abrasion-resistant Cordura nylon mesh uppers with a Vibram Mega Grip sole for reliable traction on wet and dry surfaces. The result is a single boot that reliably performs in any scenario. Available now through Yellow Dog Fly Fishing and Patagonia, the new River Salt 2 wading boot. Will FLACK, welcome back to Waypoints.
Thanks for having me, Jim. Pleasure to be here again.
God, it's always good to sit down with you.
Yeah, it's always good to come back to Montana. You know, place has got a special, place in my heart. So thanks for having me.
The last episode we did, I had forgotten this, but I went back and listened to it, and we welcomed you in with playing Rush because you needed a Canadian power ballad, right?
I think we talked about this earlier before we got on the air, but yeah, we're not talking about the Canadian hockey team right now. I don't want to hear about it.
Okay, that's fair. We'll move on. We'll move right to permit. All right, I think that's what people want to listen to anyway. Well, when you think back to our first episode 8, back in 2019. What stands out to you about where you were then as an angler and a guide as opposed to now? How much for you has changed over the past 7 years as far as your kind of overall permit philosophies and positions. And we're going to go deep in this, but that's the first question I want to ask you. You know, the evolution of the last 7 years, where you were then versus where you are today.
I mean, number one, you know, I'm a father now, so that I think has mellowed me out a little bit more. You know, I've always been known as this really intense guide. And I think over the last several years, I think I've toned that down a little bit. Both my son and daughter have just mellowed me out as a father, and I think it's for the best. I still take permit fishing very seriously. It's on my mind all the time, and yeah, a lot of things have changed in the last several years, and you know, I'm excited to talk about those things with you today.
Are you the same angler today that you were in 2019? I mean, I know you talked about having mellowed as a guide, but as far as when you're out fishing on your own, when you're out chasing permit, has a lot changed in the last 7 years for you?
I mean, I would say where I fish has changed. You know, like everywhere in the world, everything gets a lot more pressure. And I've adjusted my style a little bit just to, you know, be on the, I don't know if you'd call it the cutting edge, but you know, that same philosophy of just changing it up a little bit for me with fly patterns, and that's evolved obviously a lot in the last several years. But yeah, just where I fish has kind of changed a little bit. The programs we offer, and yeah, for me personally as an angler, I'm always excited to get on the bow. It doesn't happen a lot because you push a skiff all the time, but I'm still as intense when I'm fishing. And maybe even more so because I don't get as much time as I used to, you know, with kids and everything, and the what's the word I'm looking for? The priorities you know you have to make as a father has definitely, you know, changed my world, so for the better. And but yeah, I'm absolutely just as passionate and intense when I'm on the bow for sure.
Well, I want to get into talking about, you know, gear, flies, techniques, all of this stuff. And I want to go deep on that. But first, let's talk a little bit about what life looks like for you these days. I mean, you mentioned you've now got a family. You've got 2 beautiful children. What else has been going on in the life of WIL FLACK these past several years?
Well, I ended up, you know, building a house in Florida. So for those of you that know me and are close with me, you know that I'm back and forth all the time. So when I'm working, I'm in Belize. When I'm not working, I'm at home. And honestly, I've been, you know, just spending a lot of time with my kids, and Florida being Florida, I've been doing a ton of bass fishing. So
there you go.
Yeah, getting back to my roots as a kid with some spin casting rods and some bait casters. So that's been a lot of fun, and showing that to my son has been, I kind of know how my dad felt when he was taking my brother and I fishing, and it's all come full circle, and yeah, it's one of the greatest joys, you know, if you're a parent. And yeah, so I've been doing that. We've you know, we got a new program in Belize that we started back in 2020, but then COVID hit, so it was 2021. So the last 6 years we've been running our liveaboard program, which is kind of my focus right now. And so that with the fly shops and the permit club, we've been blessed, man, and yeah, super excited.
You've got a lot on your plate these days.
Yeah.
Well, I want to go deep on the new operation here in a little bit as well, so you can tell us about that. But you were mentioning your father teaching you and your brother when you were young. You grew up in British Columbia, kind of chasing steelhead before finding your way into the saltwater world. I know we talked about some of these details in the original episode years ago, but talk about kind of when and how you first found your way to the salt, and particularly to Caribbean waters.
Okay. Well, growing up on Vancouver Island, we were always surrounded by saltwater, the cold stuff. You know, my old man he was a big salmon fisherman. We always had a boat, always had a camper. And, you know, it was just, if we weren't fishing, we were skiing, we were hiking, we were canoeing. I mean, my old man just instilled that in my brother and I from a very young age, basically since we could walk. And, yeah, it's just that transferred into, like I said in the original podcast, I was just never destined for a 9-to-5 office job. That just wasn't in my DNA. And but yeah, it's, you know, ended up catching my first bonefish in the South Pacific, and then it just kind of took over my brain, and found my way to Belize 20 plus years ago. And it was weird. I'd been to a lot of countries before Belize, and Belize was the first country where, I got there, and whatever it was, day 2, and I was just like, I belong here. You just know, that you can't choose where you're born, but you can choose where your home is. And Belize was definitely my home. And that kind of just started the whole passion for the industry down there and the fishing. And that's turned into 20 plus years of, saltwater fly fishing for me, and being blessed enough to have a couple companies and support myself and my dreams. So yeah, very, very blessed.
Well, looking back now, Will, do you remember what first pulled you so deeply into your obsession with permit? I mean, you talked about, that first bonefish, your first time coming to Belize, and kind of feeling a connection to the country, the region, the ecosystems. But what was it that specifically kind of flipped a switch for you with permit as a species?
I would say, it was kind of my steelhead experience. I mean, they're similar, right? There's, you don't always get a lot of them to hand. You're always trying to figure them out. And I think a lot of that early fishing experience growing up in British Columbia really helped me just transition to that permit game. When I first started saltwater fly fishing, I was just solely focused on bonefish. I wanted to get, become a better caster, read the fish, read the tides, do all that. And I spent the first couple of years doing that. And that just transitioned to, learning that, getting my skill level up. And then I just went full send into the permit. I mean, it was, the saltwater steelhead, if you want to, that's the easiest way I can explain it. I've always been a passionate steelhead angler. I got it up there for quite a long time. And it's, if you ask me what 2 fish I would want to chase for the rest of my life, those would be the 2 fish. It'd be a steelhead and a permit. But yeah, that's I would say the steelhead was kind of led me down the path to permit for sure.
Makes sense. A lot of connectivity there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what's actually changed over the past several years, and what I would call kind of the recent evolution of permit fishing, if you will. From your perspective on the water, what are the biggest differences in permit fishing today compared to, say, 10, 12 years ago? Where do you think it's come as an obsession for anglers, as a focus of a lot of people who have found their way to the salt, focus for a lot of destination anglers? What do you think that evolution's looked like in the last 10 years? What do you think has changed the most?
I mean, definitely a lot more people saltwater fly fishing for sure. I mean, you've seen it in your travel business, and I've seen it at the lodge, live aboard, day trips out of the fly shop. I mean, it's gotten busier. And with that, that's an environmental change that, is affecting the pressure on the fish. Which I said earlier, I've changed a lot of my guiding techniques to start fishing new areas, and just because of that, new influx of people coming to our sport. But yeah, the gears changed a lot. One of the environmental changes too that we've seen a lot in the Caribbean, and you guys have seen it too, whether it's Mexico all the way down to Belize, Honduras, the Sargasso has been a major player this last several years. And, if you looked at 10 years ago and you would never thought a permit would eat a dry fly, and now it's happening. It's happening on a weekly basis. You know, in my boat, in, Mexican skiffs, whatever, it's happening all over. And that's just, one of the environmental changes that we're dealing with right now on the positive side. And, and with that comes new flies, new techniques. It's almost like swinging for a steelhead. You're just staying tight to that fly. It's kind of the same thing with that Sargasso crab that everyone's fishing right now. You're putting that shot out there, and you're just letting the current just take it, and the fish is just coming up. You're basically swinging a crab basically with that current, and that fish is just coming up and eating it. I mean, it's unbelievable to see this evolution based solely on an environmental change in the ecosystem. And that's been exciting to watch. And everyone's seen the clips online and the videos online, and everyone's like, yeah, I think I was upstairs in the fly shop earlier this morning, and guys on his way to Mexico and talking about Sargasso crabs again. So,
and for listeners that haven't experienced this, the kind of massive bloom of the sargassum grass that essentially kind of comes over from Africa, crosses the ocean, and then is washing up in just huge volume throughout the Caribbean, specifically, from the Yucatan, Belize, on the beaches. It's now kind of covering the flats. It's a little bit of an environmental issue because it comes up on the beach, and especially like these big resorts around Cancun, and it decays and it smells, and it's got a lot of problems that occur because of that. A lot of people are not happy about the sargassum.
Nope.
But as you mentioned, it's an environmental factor. How man-made it is. There's a lot of conversation about that. But the result for the fishing, and specifically like permit fishing, even tarpon fishing, there's been a lot of interesting developments that have come through the introduction of this mass amount of sargassum into the ecosystem, where it's really changed how these fish are feeding and what they're feeding on, changed, the water columns in which they're feeding. And it's really kind of redefined a lot of the specifically permit fishing throughout the Caribbean basin.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, those big fields of sargasso gas, or grass, it's a plethora of food for all species, whether, it's a school of permit or, a school of tarpon in the shallows, it just invites bait fish. Gregson was with us last year on the liveaboard, and, I had never seen it before, but Magic Mike and his boys on the boat and Gregson, they ran into, I thought it was a worm hatch. I went by, me, if I have a choice between tarpon and permit, I'm going permit fishing. I drove right through it. It was a worm hatch, which we ended up researching. It ended up being a very small eel, but it happened 2 mornings in a row, where we woke up on the boat, and it was just birds coming down. What's going on? And then, Mike just spent 2 mornings there just hammering on those tarpon that were eating those eels. And I'd never seen that before. And, it was just one of those right places, right time kind of situations. But honestly, again, that environmental conditions have been changing, and why did that happen? And I'm still trying to analyze that in my head. Like why then, why there? And when I'd never seen it in 2+ decades, it was crazy. But yeah, the sargasso, really weird to pull that tannic water, and you can't really see through the water column in a lot of spots. And so you blow out a lot of fish. It's just insane to think that those fish would be in that kind of tannic, nasty water, but they are, and they're eating.
Yeah, and what you're talking about there is when the sargassum washes in onto the flats, into the shallows along the shore, it immediately starts to decay, and it turns the water very kind of tannic, tea-colored.
Yep.
And as a guide or an angler, you're still pulling these areas where the permit can be prolific. It can be traditionally very productive areas, but now that clarity has completely changed at certain times of the year.
Yeah.
And so as you're saying, you're blowing up fish that you might not be seeing as easily. But they're still there.
They're still there, and you don't see them almost till it's too late. And I'm talking like not just 1 or 2 fish. I'm talking big schools of fish in 3 to 4 feet of water up on the edge of the flat, as close to shore as they can get, and they're just eating, and you don't even see them. I've seen a couple times where you see the tail come through the grass, which is, it's super cool. It'd be a sweet photo if someone could nail that, with just that black tail sticking like 5 inches out of the top of that grass would be pretty sweet. But yeah, it's amazing to think that those fish, you look at permit, they're the perfect fish. They really are. You just think they'd want pristine water, clear water and everything. And, their feeding is based mostly on eyesight. And how good can they see in that water? Honestly, like but they're in there and they're crushing whatever's in there.
They're happy.
Oh, they're great. Yeah. So, and also too, I think a lot of that floating crab, maybe they don't see it as well on the bottom, but when it's on the surface and it's making that, that disturbance, they're picking that up, I think more so than they are when that crab's on the bottom, because they can't see as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's been cool to see over the last few years. And you've all seen it on the internet. So
it's out there.
It's out there.
Word's out.
Word's out.
Yeah. Well, and we talk about environmental changes like the sargassum. I know that there's been some technological changes, advancements in gear. We're going to talk about that in just a second. And then there's also just simply a lot more people fishing for permit. And there's no doubt that more anglers are targeting permit today than ever before. I mean, it's become kind of the cool thing, I mean, social media is blown up with everybody holding permit over the last years. And so I think a lot of anglers have kind of jumped right ahead to being like, oh, I haven't saltwater fished a lot, but I want to go catch permit.
Yep.
And okay, great. No problem. There's ways to do it. Do you feel like permit in some of the major well-known fisheries, places like, Punta Gorda in Belize, Placencia, your areas off of Hopkins, Ascension Bay and Espiritu Santo Bay in the Yucatan, even the Florida Keys, are these permit in these areas becoming more educated as a result?
100%.
Yeah.
And, again, exactly why I've kind of changed my technique and where I've fished. And, I always have people ask me, where I fish and, or I'm out on the flats and I run into a guide at the marina at the end of the day or whatever. And they're like, oh, Will, how'd you do? And I'm like, oh, I did all right. Oh, I didn't see you all day. Exactly. I don't like to fish around people. A lot of people who fish with me know that I would, if I'm going to go to a flat and I'm driving and I'm like a mile or two out and I see a bunch of boats, I will completely change my whole program for the day and go somewhere else. And even though I really wanted to fish there, someone else is there and I just, I'm always rolling with the punches, but definitely more pressured. And, I think those fish have just changed their feeding windows a lot depending. And I'm sure those guys in the Keys are thinking the same thing. All those guys down there, it's a lot of pressure, a lot of boats, a lot of jet skis. And I'm sure that, those guys, Brandon, Nick, Willie, all those guys, Shane, they're changing their ways too, just to kind of figure out, are those fish, changing the way they eat? And they absolutely are. They have to be. I mean, it's like if you go knock on the same door and you're trying to get into a place and no one's answering, you're going to go try to knock on another door. So it's, absolutely pressure has changed the way these fish are acting for sure.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the importance of understanding permit behavior. And, some people might be like, well, good luck with that, right? I mean, that's what we're always talking about. And I know that one of the most interesting parts of our original conversation years ago, Will, was your insight into permit behavior and what that means for anglers. Let me ask you this. In your opinion, today, years later, how do permit actually see the world around them? If you had to answer that, how if you're a permit, how am I seeing what's going on around me in the environments in which I'm swimming, feeding, moving from point A to point B? Try to explain that to our listeners.
I mean, permit feed in shallow water, and it's a security blanket. So, permit feel way safer in deeper water, as you all know, and which is, places like San Pedro or northern Belize, maybe in Cuba on those deeper flats. Permit act way different than when they get on the shallows. So I think, their ninja mindset, if you want to call it that, when they get up on the shallows, they act way different than when they do when they're in 8 feet of water. And, they're up there to do one thing. They're up there to feed, right? But they're also, all their senses are keyed in onto, hey, I don't want to get hurt up here. I don't want something to come eat me. I don't, every sound, we've talked about in the earlier one. I mean, you can be 150 feet away from a permit not making a sound. And as soon as you go to make that cast, that sunlight beam hits that reel and that fish just blows out. And you're like, their senses when they get into the shallows just key up tenfold. And they're very wary in the shallows.
They become hyper alert.
Oh, it's insane.
Yeah. And do you think that you're talking about kind of their alert level, their overall awareness, right? Do you think their vision changes depending on what they're doing. If they're cruising, let's say it's, that 8 feet of water you're talking about, or maybe it's, 4 feet of water, a little bit deeper flat. If they're cruising, are they, focused on different things, or are they maybe not as aware or alert as when they're actively feeding? Or conversely, if they're feeding hard, do they then get locked in on what they're, going for? Say it's on the bottom, and then they become less aware of what's around them, or maybe they tone down that hyper alert level a little bit when they get locked into food?
Yeah, I would say so. When a fish is on its head upside down, it's cued into that hula hoop, that 2-3 square foot section around its nose, eyes, mouth. Absolutely. And then, everything around them, unless it's like a giant noise or something, like someone falls in a boat or misses a step and big bang on the boat, then they'll blow out. But the deeper water fish, especially if you have a school of deeper water fish, it's not just one set of eyes, it's a bunch of set of eyes. So whether, they're looking 20 feet ahead, it's 20, 30 sets of eyes. And that area of eyesight, you've seen it in a school. One fish spooks, the rest go. That's just it. It's like they've got that safety mechanism. But yeah, when they're feeding upside down, that's what they're keyed in on. I don't think their vision is looking off 10 feet to the side. That's not it. They saw something, they want to go eat it, they want to go investigate it, and they're right there. That's their scope of their vision right there. And whether they eat or not, but then when they get back up, then they're scanning again, right? They're what's going on, and scientifically, I don't know. How far are they looking 10 feet ahead of them? They've got wicked eyes, so I'm sure if they saw a crab 10, 12 feet in front of them, you've all seen it where, you're too short on a cast. It doesn't happen all the time, but, you're 10, 12 feet short and with a shrimp or whatever, and you've seen that fish leave the school and just annihilate that fly. So they obviously see it.
Yeah, they'll move on it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And, another interesting scenario that for people who've done a lot of permit fishing, especially while wade fishing, have seen is you get a fish that's really feeding hard. And like pinning things to the bottom, dialed in. That fish might move up to within a rod length of you.
You can get close.
And you're crouched down. You're basically on your knees. You're trying to make yourself as small as possible. You barely have the full leader out the rod tip, and that fish is right in front of you, and they're not even paying attention to you because they're so locked in on feeding.
Exactly. Yeah. And they're just focused on that hula hoop, and they have no, as long as you're quiet and you're stealthy, like you said, a rod length, which is, and we're talking, that could be a 12, 15, 20 pound fish. It's insane. And you've seen it in, Ascension Bay. I've seen it. It's happened to me where, you're wading up to your chest and those fish are feeding, and they eat it almost right at the rod tip. Like you don't see the 2 sets of legs standing in the water 10 feet in front of you. Like it's amazing. They just get focused on that fly, that crab, whatever it is. And they have no idea that they're about to get jolted in the mouth.
Well, in other scenarios, and this is one that I think makes these fish so confounding, right? And frustrating, but also addicting, is that, you'll have a fish that, say, is kind of posted up and feeding, a good happy fish, right? They're clearly pinning things to the bottom. They're not moving. They're very content. They're happy. They're finding a lot of food. And you'll put 10 well-placed casts right where you want it.
Yep.
Clearly, you're showing them that fly, and they're having none of it, right? Yep. Just nothing.
Not what they're eating.
Not what they're eating. But then maybe on that 11th cast, whether you've changed patterns or not, you do the same thing, and that fish moves on it.
Flips the switch.
Yeah. How do we explain that to someone that hasn't experienced that before? What is it about finding how to flip that switch with these permit? And is there anything to that? Are there techniques that you use? Is it, okay, I showed him the fly once, he didn't eat it, now I'm going to change flies. Or I'm going to show it to him again. I'm going to present it slightly different, or maybe a little closer. Or I'm going to move the way I'm retrieving that fly, or how quickly I move it when it lands.
In situations like that, I try to fish the fly a little different. I don't think, in Belize, it's like if you've got a bower crab or you've got a merkin and it's tan, it's green. You're throwing the right stuff at them, right? And for me, it's like I'll switch it up. I'll let it sit on the bottom. Are they going to eat it? No. Am I going to give it a big fast twitch? Am I going to just let the current take it? All things you got to be thinking about in the heat of the moment. And but that's my first thing. If I see a fish that's just feeding in one spot, and we've thrown that fly in there 4, 5, 6, 7 times, I'm changing the retrieve, I'm letting it sit. And honestly, it's really tough too, like a lot of times you can see the current, sometimes you can't. Maybe there's no current on the surface, maybe it's on the bottom. Does that fish, you think you got the fly there, I might say, hey, put it 3 feet to the left. The current's going to take it. And it, does it sink in time? Is he still looking at the bottom, but it goes here, above his head? We like to think that they see it, but a lot of times maybe they don't.
They get pretty locked in to what they're looking at. So it could be what you think is right in their cone of vision, and they still haven't seen it.
Yeah, exactly. And prime example is like, fish feeding on a ray, and we've all been there where, you get 3, 4, 5, 6 fish and they're on this ray and they're in 3 feet of water, 4 feet of water on the flat. And it's just a giant thing of mud, so, for them to pick up a fly in that kind of like murky water, it's tough. But when you'll put 3 or 4 shots in there and you're in there, but not one of them sees it. But then you put that 5th, 6th shot and one of them sees it and you see them dart out and they saw it. Right. And if they don't eat it, then it might be a fly change, but yeah, that's a prime example of fish that are feeding in that turbid water that maybe you did get the fly in the zone, but not one of them saw it. So, yeah.
But what I'm hearing you say is that in a typical situation with a feeding permit, you are going to change up the way you're retrieving, how long you're letting that fly sink, the length of the strip, no strip at all. You're going to do a lot of those things before you go to a fly change.
Absolutely, 100%. Depending on the area I'm fishing, I've got the right fly on already. From previous times I've fished that location or caught fish there, I'm definitely got the right fly on for what's going on. Unless it's like a freak thing, like they're eating urchins or there's a mini worm hatch that I'm not seeing and they're eating worms off the bottom. But most of the time we've got the right pattern on for that location. And I'm absolutely getting the angler to change that retrieve before I change the fly. 100%.
Yeah. I think that's key advice right there. That's a big takeaway.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you have confidence in what you're fishing, the pattern that you're going with, whether it's one that your guide loves and knows works, he's out there every day, right? Or, it's something that you've had a lot of success with in the past, lean into that.
Absolutely.
Don't make one cast, but, he doesn't want it. I'm going to quickly start, rifling different things through my box and changing flies with every presentation. Stick with it. Change a lot of things up before you change up that pattern.
Absolutely. I've said this before, Jim. It's like, I always go with my gut all the time. I've relied on it for 30 years and I'm not going to change that. If I've got that one crab tied on or that one shrimp, there's a reason that it's on there. And I have 110% confidence it's going to catch a fish. And if we've been throwing it into that fish that's feeding, it's not eating it, absolutely changing the retrieve before I'm changing the fly.
I like that. Go with your gut. 60% of the time it's going to work 100% of the time. Yeah,
exactly.
That's great. Well, let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed kind of generalized limitations on how permit see a fly will? Are they more nearsighted versus farsighted? I mean, you think about like moose or bears or something, they're kind of notorious for either being nearsighted or farsighted, depending on the species. Have you noticed that with permit, or do you think they just see anything they want to at all times when they're focusing on it?
I think it depends on the situation. Like I said, when they're feeding on the bottom, I think they're right there, nearsighted. They're focused on hypersensitive to that area. And then, those swimming ones, they see far, absolutely see far. How many times have you been on a flat and the permit are coming at you and at 60 feet, they just turn because they see the boat or they see the guy on the top of the bow? You've seen their eyes. They're like soup cans on those big fish. I mean, they can see behind them, side them. It's a funny story. We had Joel Dickey down in Belize, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago?
Joel Dickey.
Old
Dickus.
And he told me an interesting story, and this has never happened to me, but he had a big permit in Florida coming down a flat. And Joel, hopefully I'm telling this story right if you're listening. It's a very cool story. But he had this permit coming down the flat, and angler made the cast, but it was behind the fish, kind of beside it. It was kind of a straight-on shot or whatever it was. And the fly ended up landing I think he said it was 2 feet to the left of the fish. All right. And the fish is moving slow. So the crab starts to sink. That fish saw that fly. He didn't turn to eat it. He just opened his mouth, and the vacuum, even 2 feet away, sucked that fly right into that fish's mouth.
Moved the fly to him.
90 degrees.
Wow.
That fly. And it's a crazy story. You think, okay, it's 20 to 24 inches away. You know how much volume of water to suck that fly in that permit's mouth? I mean, and that just gives you an example of like when that fish opens its mouth and the volume of water that's rushing in his mouth, out his gills, I mean, it's a giant vacuum. And he said that fish just was swimming, opened its mouth, it got sucked into the void, and that fish just kept swimming without Joel was like, what just happened? I mean, I've never had that happen to me, but it was a cool story, recent story that I heard.
Well, we talk so much about their eyesight, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I always ask and I always talk about, and I've always wondered, is how much of a factor smell is for permit. Now, if you look at a permit, especially a larger, 15 to 20 pound permit, you look at the makeup of the front of their face, right?
Yep.
And the nostrils, essentially, that they have.
Aliens,
absolutely. But very different than, kind of the hardware that a bonefish is equipped with, or a tarpon or a snook. How much more of a factor do you think smell is for the way permit hunt, find food, feed, than it is for some of the other common flat species? Or do you think there's no difference at all?
I think eyesight's the number one for sure. Just look at their eyeballs. I do think the scent comes into play, absolutely. You always hear about this, do I put sunscreen on my flies? Honestly, I don't think it makes a difference. I mean, I used to. I don't think it does anymore. I mean, I've changed motor oil on my boat, and then had oil all over my hands and tied on a fly. And the very next cast, I've caught a fish. So, and I've used the sunscreen every day. I never wash my hands, and I'm tying on flies, touching leaders. I'm still catching fish. I mean, does it matter? I don't think so. But I do think, permit do use the smell. I mean, their whole face is just, between the mouth, the nose, the eyes, especially a big fish. I mean, when those crabs are buried in the sand, you got to think it's a scent thing, right? They're not seeing the crab,
right?
It's they're you'll see fish going along the flat, and you see it in Cuba a lot. They're on those big deep flats, those sands, and they're swimming. So all of a sudden they just stop, and I don't think they saw a crab that was on top. Maybe they saw a crab 10, 15 feet away that was on top and then buried itself. But you see them go around. You've seen them all on the bottom, just looking down.
Yeah, they look like a Labrador trying to catch a scent.
Yeah, exactly. So I think a lot of the buried prey, the nostrils come into it for sure. But I think the main is the eyesight. The eyesight's a big thing for permit.
And so many other factors along with sight and smell. Obviously, we talk a lot about bottom type, right? Whether it's turtle grass, white sand, crushed coral. When they're in these different types of bottom environments, oftentimes they're hunting different types of food.
Yep.
But again, if they're there and they're in the shallows, they're there for a reason, and that's to feed. Obviously, these different kind of environments, again, crushed coral, thick turtle grass, that's going to impact the way these permit are feeding.
Yep.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about that.
I mean, I will give you one tip that, you'd think that if you're fishing on turtle grass, you'd throw a green fly. No, I always like the distinction, like I said, permit are feeding with their eyes first and foremost. And so like if I'm on a solid turtle grass flat, I'm probably going to throw a white or a tan crab. It's going to see that a lot better.
And that just flies in the face of traditional conventional wisdom.
Absolutely. Not saying that you can't throw a green crab, but if you're a little bit outside that hula hoop, it's not going to pick it up. But say you're a foot outside that hula hoop and you're fishing a tan or a cream colored one, he's going to see that because it's that distinction on that dark background with that white tan fly. So that's a little tip for everybody out there. Turtle grass is tough, man. It's I almost prefer, everyone loves the sand because you can see them. Coral is nice because it's got that molted bottom, so you can kind of fish a bunch of different color patterns. I've been a real big proponent of dark brown lately.
On the color of your fly, dark brown?
Dark brown. Yeah. And I actually just got a new fly from Mike Mitchell out of Idaho, and we've been talking about it for a while, but kind of like a dark brown. It's basically a sargasso crab made for the bottom is what it is. A dark brown with like fluorescent orange on it. And which I think is a trigger color for permit, whether it's a mantis spawning shrimp or whatever it is. I mean, that fluorescent orange color, you see it in the sargasso crabs. You've all seen it. And I've got this new one that we're testing out right now. But yeah, I really like the contradiction in the bottom color to the fly color. I like that. I just think, they pick it up a little faster. Not saying that it works all the time. There are certain situations where, they're on that flat, and maybe I've seen tan and white crabs all over the place on the top of the coral heads, and then I'm gonna fish the tan and on that tan bottom. But I do like that distinction, especially like fast moving water, like you get on the reefs and stuff like that, where you have those waves crashing. You've seen it, Gregson. You've seen it. Where you're only in that sight zone for seconds, right? And if you're fishing that and that crab is matching the color of the bottom, they're not going to see it as fast. Whereas if you got that tan, that white on that dark bottom by the reef, and that fly zips by their face, they're going to pick that up really fast. But yeah, that's I would say that I'm fishing that 80 to 90% of the time, that different color.
And, you're talking about moving water. Of course, anytime you're talking about saltwater fishing, flats fishing, tides come into play. That's probably the number one question we get is, okay, what's the best tide going to be? And I think people get fixated on that because, by and large, it's a fairly known factor. You can look at tide charts, and they're not always accurate, especially in a place like Belize. Wind can have a big bearing on how accurate the tides actually are.
Exactly.
And that's just the geography of kind of that part of the Caribbean coastline is that tides can oftentimes be either exacerbated or totally negated by wind, right? Yep. We've seen that. But overall tides, people get very locked into studying tides and trying to crack the code on the best tide for permit. In your opinion, and by the way, we could talk for hours about tides. We're not going to go
It's another podcast.
Yeah, it's a whole other series of podcasts. So we're not going to go too deep on that one. But in your opinion, and from your experience, do you think tides are the most important factor when chasing permit, or do you think they're simply one of several factors? And there's endless debates about this, right?
Yeah. Talked about it before. Tide is crucial to the feeding window. Absolutely. Like I said earlier, I've kind of changed my techniques a little bit. I've been catching a lot of fish on low tides. Usually you think where we are in southern Belize, a low tide, you kind of just want to go home. But I've been catching a lot of fish on the bottom ends of those tides lately because I've been changing up where I've been fishing. But I would say like moon, tides, and water temperature. Those are the three key things, I think, especially when it comes to permit fishing. It's why, I've been telling everybody for a long time, in my boat, like my favorite time of year to fish is summertime. You just get that extra couple degrees of warmer water, and permit love it. You've all been to Belize in the summertime. It's, they just love that, 83, 84, 85. And you're just, it's hot. It's hot as balls outside when you're pulling a skiff, but it's, the permit love it. So yeah, I would say like moon and the, what tide phase it is and the temperature of the water. Those are three key issues that I'm sure most serious permit guides would agree upon. Whether you're in Australia, Mexico, Florida Keys, Bahamas, Belize, those are probably the three main factors. And then, wind direction. And I think unless it's coming out of the north in the Caribbean, I think wind direction plays a key part. But for me, when I see a wind change, it just changes where I'm going fishing, right? It doesn't negate the fact that we're not going to, you're not going to see permit because the wind changed. You might not see permit for a little bit, especially an initial wind change. If you've got east-southeast in Belize and all of a sudden at, halfway through the day, that thing switches, you'll see the flats turn off. But if that wind is the same the next day, where it's still it's stabilized in that same direction, it's just changing where I'm fishing. The fish are going to change their feeding habits based on that wind direction.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a good point. Especially, people book a trip, right?
Yep.
Oftentimes they book a year out. So now they've got their dates.
Yep.
And that's it. Like they're there.
Yep.
And then people say, I'm looking at the weather. I'm tracking the wind. I'm leaving next week. I'm getting nervous. It's like, well, don't, because you're going.
Yep.
And if you're fishing with a good guide, that guide should have a plan.
Yep.
When you guide year round, you're not going to say, I only fish 2 weeks out of every month because of the tides. And I like these, or a certain moon phase, or gosh, the wind changed, we're done.
Yep.
You got to have a plan.
You do.
And as you said, it doesn't determine whether or not you're fishing, or either whether or not you're finding success with your fishing. It just may change up where you're fishing and how you're fishing.
Exactly. And if you've got a great permit guide, they're going to roll with the punches. I mean, in all kinds of fishing, whether, you're low water steelhead or, you've got a wind direction change as a permit tarpon guide. I mean, you're just changing where you're going, what you're doing, what your game plan is, and you just got to roll with the punches. I mean, most guides who are serious about it, they've got plans. They know what they're doing when they get in their boat, based on previous days, previous weeks, what the season's been shaping up to look like. And I don't mind a wind change. The first part of the wind change is usually the bad part, but once that stabilizes, you're still getting shots. You just, I mean, for us in the Caribbean, like I said, the north is the worst wind. It just, that just holds that tide, right? You just get negative low tides and the fish just don't come up on the flats. And even in those cases, Magic, myself, we're just changing our program, right? We're going to fish deeper flats. We're going to fish edges, basins, where those fish are staging.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to the next topic, Will. I want to talk in more detail about permit flies.
Oh, I thought you were going to say bass fishing.
No, sorry. That's a different podcast.
Yeah, okay.
We're going to talk about permit flies and what actually matters. Now, fly design has changed a lot, especially since even our last conversation 7 years ago, right? When you look at the flies that anglers are bringing to the game today, whether it's anywhere in the Caribbean, different fisheries, the known fisheries, or to your fishery in Belize, what are you liking right now? Obviously, a ton of evolution and advancements when it comes to materials, things like that. Talk to us a little bit about permit flies today, what you're liking.
I mean, the advances in materials have been huge. You've all seen it. I mean, the tires these days, and you Dougie, Mike, Alec, all those guys, Drew Chacon. I mean, they're tying some unbelievable bugs right now, and hooks have gotten sharper, better. All the synthetic fabrics coming out are. I mean, you look at the synthetic products that were 10 years ago, and you look at now. I mean, there's 20-fold, 30-fold of the type of material you can get to tie a crab now. Honestly, the creativity has been unbelievable. And, like this whole floating Sargasso crab thing has just taken off in the last few years. And it's responsible for hundreds, if not thousands, of permit caught in the Caribbean for sure. And, the mad scientists of these fly tires these days is crazy. I mean, I used to tie a whole bunch of flies, and I don't anymore. Just lifestyle change, and more time with my kids now, and just pushing a boat. Don't have time to tie as much anymore. But Doug McKnight's flies, Mike Mitchell, Alec, Drew Chacon, like I said, those guys are at the forefront of tying these saltwater patterns right now that are just responsible for changing the game. It's I mean, who would ever thought a permit would eat a dry fly? It's crazy. I mean, once in a while you used to hear about it, in PG with Scully or Oliver, or Yogi, but it was like a rarity. You hear about it once every 2 or 3 years. They got a nice big permit on a floater coming out of Yakos Lagoon, right? It was just like, you just never heard about it. And now it's like I said, it's a weekly thing. Someone's catching a permit on a dry fly, whether it's Belize or Mexico. So it's been really fun to watch the evolution of the fly patterns that are coming out these days. I don't think we're done either. I mean, I've got a bunch of new ones coming from Doug and Mike Mitchell. And I'm really excited about Mike Mitchell's new fly that he just sent me for the new liveaboard season. Probably going to catch a bunch on that this year.
Well, you think about these advancements that we're talking about, and I always kind of go back and forth because, we own a fly shop. We sell a lot of flies. We send people out to all corners of the world, chasing saltwater fish, and we are always trying to stock the largest selection, but also the latest and greatest and the new introductions and innovations. I always kind of wonder, it's like, okay, how much of these advancements are really focused on catching new anglers or more anglers, as far as like they've got to have the latest and greatest, and how much of a factor is that in actually changing the game on catching fish? And I guess that's one of the big debates, right? Because at the same time, you take a Will Bauer crab pattern that's 35 years old, and you can still go down and have really good days with a tried and true, proven pattern that hasn't changed at all in the last
decades.
4 decades. But then we talk about these new materials, the new profiles. I mean, a great example, I have to say the last 5 years is the popularity of the Alflexo crab that Alec Gerbeck created. That's
unbelievable.
been unbelievable,
Fly.
right? Yeah. And so, there is the thought process. It's like, well, yeah, all these new flies that are great at catching anglers, but are they great at catching fish?
Yeah.
And I guess hearing what you're saying, it's like, well, it kind of depends on the pattern.
It does. It absolutely does. I mean, one of the things when I'm in my boat, someone opens a fly box, and just that first glance, you know what's going to work depending on where you are, and what's not, depending on whether they tie them themselves or, sink rates, whatever it is. I mean, even the littlest thing, like, you remember back in the day, it was like we had dumbbell eyes that were gray. That was it. And then someone along the line, Hairline, Dubbin, or whoever it was, decided, hey, what happens if we took some nail polish and painted them red or yellow like the Pato crab, right? I mean, look at that fly. How many permit has that fly caught in Mexico? And all because they just painted the eyes. Really, that's what it was. They painted the eyes. Yeah. And that small little thing changed it, And I mean, I look at, fly, like Mitchell was down last year on the liveaboard, and he always comes with just the most amazing fly boxes. I mean, and you just open it up and you're like, we're going to have such a good day with these patterns. I mean, you just 110% confidence, like, we're going to put a fly to a fish and it's going to swallow it whole. And that's exactly what happened.
You get pretty fired up when you get a client that shows up, has a box that's full of just lots of different patterns.
Yeah. I mean, the big thing is know where you're going, have the right colors is kind of the color and sink rate on crabs.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's strip the design of a permit fly down to the most basic principles. And I want to hear what you think is the most important and what truly matters. All right. Weight, profile of the fly, movement, texture of materials. What do you prioritize when it comes to the basic principles of an effective permit fly?
For me, durability. Absolutely. You want a fly that's tied really well, that can last, on multiple fish. Nobody likes changing flies because a fly's broken, especially when you're, how much are really good custom permit flies right now? I mean, what are they? I mean, in the Keys, what's a Skoke fly? $20-25 a pop. I mean, you're looking at $300-400 for a dozen of those flies. That's that's crazy money that people are spending. And, Skoke ties great flies. I mean, could you imagine spending $25 on a fly and you take 6-7 casts and it falls apart? I mean, that's for me, I like durable flies. But on your question, yeah, I mean, 3 key things, man. It's got to be the right color, right, for where you're fishing. It's got to be the right profile. Is it the right size? How many times have I been in Belize where I was in Florida last week and they bring all their 1/0 permit crabs? I mean, they're not working. They're too big. So yeah, profile, and then sink rate, depending on where you're fishing. You don't want to just throw it into 1 foot of water and it's snagged on the bottom in a half a second. I mean, you don't want that. You want something slow, right? But then you also, if you're in deeper water, you want something heavy. So those are the 3 things, that definitely you should be thinking about when you're putting crabs in your box for the location.
And I think weight is crucial because
absolutely.
I always talk about the importance of let's take a Pato's crab we were talking about, right? We know it's effective. You got the right color, the right profile, it works. You even narrow down the right size to a specific fishery. But then you want that fly, that exact fly, same size hook, same profile, in, say, 3 different sink rates.
Exactly.
You want it for skinny water, for, kind of middle of the road water, flats that are, 2 to 3, 4 feet deep, and then some deeper water ones where they're going to sink really fast. So having that variety of different sink rates along with the different sizes and patterns and colors is crucial.
Also, too, you got to think about bottom composition, like, is it turtle grass? Is it kind of like marley? I mean, I'll fish sometimes depending on the bottom composition. Like I'll be in shallow water, but I'll put a heavy fly on. And the reason being is like when it gets to the bottom and I lead that fish, put it in wherever the hula hoop is, I want it to get to the bottom immediately because on the first strip, I want it to puff mud. That's what I want, right? I want it to puff mud. And if you're it's not going to puff mud if you have a light fly. It's not. It's going to sit on the surface. Not saying they're not going to eat that because maybe they're going to see it, maybe they won't. But that puff of mud, just think about a crab trying to bury, right? It's poof. It's making that little puff. So that's the one instance where I want a heavy crab, depending on the bottom composition.
What is your personal confidence fly these days? If I'm gonna I'll give you 3. Okay, if you're gonna go somewhere in Belize, let's say even the Greater Caribbean, you're going to get 3 patterns. You can have multiple sizes, different sink rates, but 3 patterns. What are your top 3?
Okay, so deeper water schooling fish. I'm probably going to throw Mitchell Itchy and Scratchy.
Itchy and Scratchy.
Itchy, that fly. You sell them here. It's caught a lot of permit and a lot of bonefish, a lot of triggers. I mean, it is one pattern that you should have in your fly box at all times when fishing the Caribbean or anywhere saltwater in the world for that matter. That's probably my shrimp pattern is going to be the Itchy Scratchy. Shout out to Mike Mitchell. Love you, bud. And then, probably crab pattern. Micro strong arm probably for Belize. I like that pattern and a bunch of different weights and colors, white, tan. Like I said before, I'm fishing a lot of dark brown lately. So don't throw dark brown because I'm already throwing it if everyone's listening. But micro strong arm, and then I'm gonna give this to you guys too. I fish squid.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
There's a ninja move.
I see Gregson shaking his head. Why'd you tell everybody? But yeah, it's I got a fly pattern hopefully coming out with fulling mill that I'm going to tie up for those guys and I've actually talked to Dougie McKnight about this too at length over the last few years. But there's some deeper water giant permit that I know they need a protein meal. We're talking like 20, 25, 30 pound permit that absolutely are feeding in those channels on those big. You've seen the squid in Belize, right? Hit you in the boat, ink up all your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's those. I think those 3 fly. I mean, that squid pattern and catch GTs. It's going to catch permit. It's going to tarpon elite it. I mean, those are probably my 3 flies: a micro strong arm, Itchy Scratchy, and a custom squid.
All right. Well, hopefully everybody was taking notes at home right there.
Yeah, don't fish any of those.
Good
please.
advice. Yeah, don't bring those to Belize. Yeah. Let's shift over from flies to other types of gear, okay? Mm-hmm. Specifically the evolution of gear and equipment, let's say over the past 10 years. We've seen a lot of changes in rods and fly lines lately. When it comes to permit, Will, are we still primarily living in a 9-weight world for permit, or are you seeing more anglers move towards, say, 8 weights or even 10 weights, depending on the conditions?
Yep. I mean, if I'm going fishing, I'm bringing a 9 and a 10. For the most part, all floating lines, just where I am, it's a lot of shallow water. I might have a spare spool with like an intermediate tip on it. And on that, I would, if any of the fly line companies are listening right now, we really need a clear tip fly line that's only 3 or 4 feet of clear. I mean,
rather than 15 feet.
Rather than the 9 or the 12 right now. It's too much. I mean, a lot of people can't judge how much distance they have out already, especially if maybe you're a novice fly angler. But and that's for a lot of people. For the most part, saltwater fly fishing, you're fishing in the wind, and the more chance you can give yourself to turn over that fly, with that leader. Nobody wants to throw a 15 to 16 foot long leader. That's a pain in the ass. I mean, it's hard for me to turn that over. I would like to see a clear tip floating fly line that's only 3 or 4 feet of clear would be nice. And then you could just tie on your tapered, 9 or 10 foot leader. And now that 9 or 10 foot leader is 13, 14 feet, but it's not leader. It's a fly line, right? You're going to be able to turn over that like real easily, but you're still getting that stealth without having to throw a 14 or 15 foot leader. So,
are you a fan of the clear tip lines? I mean, they've been around in the past.
They have, yep.
Years ago, 25, 30 years ago, Monic came out with a clear
the
floating
flow,
line.
Yeah, that was.
There have been different iterations, but lately, especially with like the SA magnitude clear tips, they've been hot lately.
They have been.
I mean, we sell a ton of them. Do you believe that this is a real advantage for permit anglers and it makes a measurable difference?
Absolutely. Just a little more stealthy. I honestly think like it depends on your experience level. If you don't have a lot of saltwater fly fishing experience, I mean, it's really hard to judge where your fly is, right? But if you can see the end of your fly line, that helps a lot. So I say if you're a beginner or you're, more of a novice angler, like maybe you only get to saltwater fly fish a week, 10 days a year, I would say, the whole thing should be colored just for your own peace of mind. So you can see where you're fishing, you're analyzing that. And as you get better, maybe move to a clear tip. That's my personal preference for people on my boat. I still like fishing a full color line. I mean, that's what I have on right now on my 9-weight. Because no one's making a 3 or 4 foot clear tip right now.
Well, hopefully somebody's listening.
Hopefully.
I mean, the WIL FLACK permit line right there.
It would be nice. I like it.
And you touched on this a second ago, but longer leaders. When you and I fished together 20 years ago, we were fishing, 14-foot leaders. That was kind of the mindset back then. Are you still fishing them long, or are you shortening things up? I mean, obviously, when you fish it in conjunction with a clear tip line, you can get away with a shorter leader. Your thoughts on that these days?
I mean, usually I'm fishing kind of like 10 to 12 feet right now for the most part. Just easier for clients to turn that over. And, where we are too, shallow water, waves, it kind of depends on the environment. I mean, if it's Calma Blanca, you're going 15, 16-foot leader down to 12 pound. That's just the way it is because it's dead calm. But, if you've got 10, 15 knots of breeze and you're on the reef and the waves are crashing and stuff, the shorter leader is just way easier to fish and manage than a 14 or 15 footer. But yeah, I'd say like for the most part, 10, 12 foot is what is usually tied on my rod in the boat at most times, and I would probably not change that if that 3 to 4 foot clear tip did exist. I'd probably still run the 10, 12 foot leader. But you're still only throwing, like I said, 10 or 12 feet, not a 15, 16 foot leader. So,
but you're changing things up based on conditions.
Yep.
Even throughout the course of a day.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. And like I said, though, there's a lot of times where fish are kind of spooky and, and it might just be that, hey, let's go from, 16 pound down to 12. And that might be the one difference that it takes, right? Just that little softer presentation, don't see the leader as much. But yeah, it's the little things. I mean, you're constantly analyzing and adapting and overcoming in the sport. It really, like whether it's bonefish, permit, tarpon, GTs, whatever you're fishing for, you're constantly analyzing the conditions that you're in, and if you're not doing that, then you're making a huge mistake. I mean, if you got to be constantly looking at the situation. Like when I'm pulling a skiff and my angler who's ever on the bow, he or she's on the bow. And we put a perfect shot and that fish follows the fly and doesn't eat it. Why is it not eating it? Did it see the boat? Did we make a bunch of noise? Did we have the wrong fly on? Did we fish it wrong? Constantly analyzing in my head as I'm pushing the next flat. Like, why didn't that fish eat? And I think it drives me insane at night. I can't go to sleep because it's like, what did we do wrong? Like, what did I do wrong? Did I not have the boat positioned right? Were we a foot short? I don't think so. I mean, you're constantly evolving for the next shot. And I think that's a real key thing for saltwater fly fishing in general is like you gotta keep analyzing and not, if you're like, oh, you didn't eat it, let's just go to the next flat. I mean, well, why didn't you eat it? I mean, you got to be thinking about those things to make your next shot better. Maybe you got to fish it better, but yeah, please just analyze
and don't get lazy.
No,
if you need to change things up, change it up. Not just your pattern, but your leader configuration, whatever it is.
How many times have you and I been on a boat where we've been like gone hours and hours and hours of nothing, and then you get complacent? The worst. You're kind of daydreaming, your feet are sore because you've been standing in the sun on the deck of that boat for 4 hours and you're not paying attention. And then all of a sudden, boom, there's 10 of them. And you're not ready. It's just like, and the permit do it to you. They drive you crazy. I've said it before. It's like, if everyone's, I should go permit fishing, Will, don't do it. It ruins lives.
Evil creatures.
Evil.
Well, before we move on from leader and tippet, quickly, fluorocarbon, mono, where are you these days as far as a difference, a preference? What are you fishing?
Fishing a lot of fluoro right now just because I fish around a lot of coral, so I need that abrasion resistance. You know, and fluoro too sinks a little better. I do love the way monofilament ties. I like monofilament knots better than I like fluorocarbon knots. It ties a better knot, but I'll fish whatever, you know, people bring into my boat. You know, I've always got all the gear in my boat, and if we're going to be fishing, you know, around a lot of coral, I'm definitely going to go fluorocarbon. So for the most part, fluoro where I'm fishing right now in Belize.
Well, talking about presentation, all right. When anglers make a cast to a permit, what would you say are the most common mistakes that you see from anglers on the front of your boat? That, you know, everything comes into play. You've got the boat positioned right. It's at an optimal distance of, say, 40 to 50 feet. You've got a permit that's clearly feeding, is engaged. They go to make that first cast. What are the most common mistakes?
People try to rush it, you know. They see the fish and they want to go right away. The boat's not positioned right. You know, I've always, in my boat, it's like, I'll tell people, I'm like, listen, I'm going to spot the fish. All right. And it's going to, I might have to change the way the boat's positioned. Maybe the wind's coming too much over the right shoulder if you're a right-hand caster. So I gotta, you know, switch that boat 20, 30 degrees so you get that better shot. So people try to rush a lot, especially if you're a novice angler. If you watch guys who are successful, serious permit fishermen, they're not reactive, right? They stay calm, they analyze the situation, and they wait for the best possible opportunity before they make that cast. That's huge. And I know a lot of people are excited and they see that first fish and they just start casting. And meanwhile, who's ever pushing the boat's trying to position the boat and they get a hook in the ear or whatever it is. But don't rush it. Don't rush it. You know, analyze the situation, listen to your guide. And, you know, the key thing after that is most mistakes, it's, you know, hopefully you've practiced your double haul because you might be shooting into the wind, but most mistakes are the permit just never sees the fly. You think you're there, but you're 3-4 feet short. You know, you just be aggressive. And I said that in the last podcast several years ago. You gotta put the fly where the fish is, period. Now that changes depending, like if they're swimming fast or, you know, they've changed direction. How many times have they done that? But for the most part, if their heads down, get it in that hula hoop, man. I keep preaching this. It's like the more casts you make at a permit, the less your chances are of catching that fish. If you can, you know, get that fly into that feeding zone on the first or second cast, then you're going to start hooking up. If it's taking you, like I said before, 5, 6, 7, 8 casts to get it in there, I mean, that fly line's been in the air for 30, 45 seconds. You know, the fish are seeing it. It's the fly's landing, then it's getting ripped out, then it's landing, it's getting ripped out. I mean, those fish become more wary, as I've seen. Just stay calm, analyze the situation, and just make sure you make that first shot count. That's the best advice I can give, for sure.
Well, let's talk about your quick answers on where to place that fly. You just talked about putting it in the right place. So here's a couple classic permit scenarios. You tell me, as a guide, where you want that fly. You've got, let's say, two fish. You got a lead fish. They're tailing slowly in, say, 2.5 feet of water on the flats. Ideally, where's your client placing that fly in front of that lead fish? How close?
I mean, it depends on, for me, where I am. Current, like, is the current moving right to left to right? Is it pushing at them? Is it pushing away? If it's no current, I'm going to put it right in front of that fish in that hula hoop, so that, you know, 2-3 feet right in front of that fish's face, you know, and that you have to analyze. Like I said, you're always analyzing how fast is that fish swimming, you know. It's got to be in the hula hoop. That's the feeding zone in front of that fish's face. If you're in that hula hoop, good chance that fish is going to see that fly.
All right. How about if you have a school of, say, 5 or 6 fish, 4 to 6 feet of water, and they're cruising. They're not racing, but they're moving. They're not really kind of posting up and feeding. They're just kind of moving from point A to point B. You're going to get that shot. Where are you ideally placing that fly?
I'd like to show it to more than one. We've talked about this before, but I would rather have that shot on the quarter than straight on. You know, straight on shots are really, really tough. You know, you got boat drift. You've got, you know, snake in the line. I would rather have that shot to school on like a 10 or a 2 o'clock backhand or something like that, where, you know, you can 3, 4, 5, 6 fish see it instead of just the one fish you put it to as a straight on shot. But I mean, if that's all you got, if you got a straight on shot, you just put it right in front of the school, and hopefully 1 or 2 of them are going to pop out of that school and fight it. I mean, you always love that. You've been in that situation where you've got a school of 10 to 20 fish coming right at the boat. And you always want that. As soon as you put that fly and you start stripping it, you know, say it's a shrimp, and you love when you see those 2 or 3 come out, because you know now it's a competition, and it's just like your heart rate goes up to 170, and you're like, oh, he's going to eat it. He's going to eat it. They're going to fight and push each other. You've seen that where permit push each other out of the way. I mean, it's a glorious thing.
It's like roller derby.
Oh, it's great.
It's the best. How about fish on a stingray, feeding actively on a ray? Where are you putting that fly?
Right on the back. Yeah.
Back of the ray.
Again, though, if you're on a 90-degree shot, say, you know, the shot's at 3 o'clock, say I'm anchored up on the reef, ray's facing the reef, and it's a 50-foot shot, I'm actually going to, because the current's coming from the waves, right? So I'm going to put left to right. So I'm going to drop that, depending on how fast the current is, I'm going to drop that fly, you know, 3, 4, 5 feet to the left. So that current naturally, almost like swinging a steelhead bug, right? In a tail out or something, that crab is just going to tumble with a straight line as it's sinking right into that zone. That's a shot on a ray. But again, if it's a straight on shot, you're on a sand flat, just right on its back, let it sink, give it the strip.
You know, one thing in talking about these different scenarios that I think really can differentiate someone who is consistently successful at feeding permit and hooking permit, the best permit anglers out there have become very adept at reading these fish, reading the, I guess you would say, the body language of these fish. And that's not an easy thing for typical anglers, because that's something that you get from being out there all the time.
That just comes with experience.
More
time on the water, more locations, you know, just more hours on the bow watching different permit behavior. I mean, you learn, how many times have you been on the boat where an angler has missed the eat? They're waiting for the feel, but the thing is a permit sucks it in and spits it out in a second. I mean, if you once you learn how to read that fish where it swims up and it stops, if you're not stripping as it stops, you're missing it. You know, by the time you react, he's already spit it out and crushed it.
And it's so cool to sometimes just step back and really focus on watching the fish, not just watching your hands as you're stripping or thinking about your cast, or obviously, you know, knees are shaking. People are kind of losing their cool a little bit because they're so amped up about permit. But to just sit back for a minute and watch those fish, how they're feeding, how they're moving, how they're quickly surging up onto an opportunity that presents itself, and really reading the body language of these fish. And I think the most successful permit anglers, certainly the most successful guides, right? Yeah. That is the deal, is reading the fish.
Absolutely. You just constantly analyzing. You know, I'm doing it as a guide on the back of the tower, and those serious guys that are doing it all the time. Like, I got a pleasure to fish with Mike Ward in Saudi Arabia last year, and you know, he's been on my boat before in Belize, and watching him fish and the way that he analyzes shots. And I mean, it's like a math equation for him. It's just, you know, you just to stand back and watch. And he's caught a lot of them. I don't know, is he 600 now or 590, whatever it is. I mean,
he's well over 500.
Yeah,
I know that.
He permit fishes a lot more than most humans. But it's an absolute pleasure to stand back, whether it's on my boat or standing on the beach in Saudi Arabia, and watch him go to work. I mean, it's crazy how analytical it is. And I think to be a successful permit fisherman, that's what it takes. You constantly analyzing and overcoming the obstacles, and that's when you start catching a bunch of fish.
How much from your decades of guiding, would you say patience plays into this whole game? And I'm not just talking about fly fishing in general or even flats fishing, but for permit, these are not easy fish. Yep. And no matter what the situation is, they're always difficult. From what you see guiding these days, Will, are anglers getting better with their patience level or worse? And if it's worse, is it like, hey, thank you, social media? I mean, what are your thoughts on the patience factor with permit fishing?
I mean, I call it the 3 Ps. I mean, if you've ever been down to the lodge, you've seen that poster in the basement, you know, the 3 Ps: patience, persistence, permit. I mean, they all go, if you got the patience and you have the persistence to keep doing the right things, it's going to equal permit. I think a lot of, 10 years ago, there wasn't a lot of information about permit. Not a lot of people were doing it. There was the hardcore bunch of us, and, you might have people go on trips and run into a permit, but I don't think a lot of people were seriously, pre-social media were, hey, I'm going to go permit fishing. There was the hardcore groups, right? That was it. I think there's a lot of knowledge out there now. There's a lot of resources, the flies, the lines, everything has made it a lot more accessible for a lot of people. And that's a good thing. I think the more people in our industry, the stronger we get as a whole. And I think if you haven't caught a permit, I think it should be on your list for sure. It's especially if you've done bone fishing and tarpon fishing before. It's just like, even when I started, it was all about the bonefish, and that was just to get my head wrapped around saltwater fly fishing. And honestly, those things, once you become, good at bone fishing, it's just all that same thing just translates to permit fishing, right? You're staying patient. So, shallow water bonefish are tough. The big ones are, the Bahamas, Hawaii. If you can consistently catch, big bonefish in the Bahamas and Hawaii, you're going to catch permit. All those same techniques translate into permit fishing. So, I welcome anybody to come try it.
Well, if someone is thinking about coming down and saying, all right, I've got the bug, I want to get serious about this, I want to commit to what it takes to coming tight on a permit, right? How should anglers mentally approach a permit trip? If someone's coming down for the first time to fish with you, what kind of advice would you give them as far as kind of pre-trip preparation and mental preparation for permit?
I don't think you should have any expectations. I think you should come down and be willing to learn. People on my boat, I tell them all the time, like, hey, we're going to go permit fishing. It might be your first time. It might be, your seventh time. You may have caught one. You may have caught none. But you are going to be a better angler when you leave. And that's going to translate to more experience. And you're going to take that on your next trip. And like I said, it's, a lot of patience to do this sport, a lot of persistence to consistently get these fish to hand. And I've said it before in previous podcasts, it's not a numbers game. Looking at social media, you think it was a numbers game and everyone's always talking about numbers, but it's like, it's not that. It's, permit and steel. It's not a numbers game. It's about like, hey, it's a challenge. It's one of the hardest challenges in our sport. And getting one to hand is a huge accomplishment for anybody. And, whether you're in San Pedro or the Bahamas or Mexico or whatever, if you catch one permit in a week, it's a good week. And I think if you take that mentality and you take that positive, it's going to translate to more. If you come down to Belize and you only catch one in a week, and you're mad about that,
might not be your thing.
It might not be your thing. And you're going to have bad weeks. It's permit fishing. I have bad weeks. I go weeks without catching a permit. Might see a lot of permit. Might try to feed a lot of permit. Might break a bunch of permit off. But there's weeks where you try everything and you analyze. You do the best you can, and it just doesn't happen. But you take away the positives, and you try to remedy the negatives, and you move on. And I think if you understand that, I think you're going to become a great permit angler.
Well, when you first started down in Belize, Will, you were guiding off of Ambergris Key with Tres Pescados. Mm-hmm. Then you added an incredible operation down in Hopkins, a fixed-base lodge called Belize Permit Club, which very quickly became popular with hardcore permit anglers that were willing to go down and spend a week focused on this one species. Yep. Well, now you've got a new development, and you mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast, but I want to ask you a little bit about your latest project. It is a live-aboard operation called Palometa Belize, a mothership concept. Mm-hmm. Talk to us a little bit about the introduction of this program and where this is headed for the future.
So super excited about this. It's been in my brain for a couple decades, just from my sailing experience as a kid. And, the Belize is the perfect environment for this type of program. We're only 200 miles long, so you can sail from one end to the other in 24 hours. We've got that great inshore inside the reef. We got the outer atolls. But it's been in my brain for a while, and we're going on our 6th year right now. Haven't done a lot of advertising. It's been a lot of word of mouth with, repeat clients, and it's just every year it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And we're super proud to be offering it full time now. And we basically leave out of Belize City, and we've got 2 skiffs, myself and Magic Mike are guiding.
What's the platform?
Catamaran, 55 foot catamaran.
Yeah.
And air conditioned cabins, private heads. We got my buddy Danny out of San Pedro is our captain. I've known Danny for a long time. He's a great guy. And Miss Hannah, she's originally from Reno, Nevada, of all places. She's our chef, and the food is unbelievable. It's some of the best food in Belize, and it's fresh. A lot of fresh fish, lobster during the season, conch during the season, and we fish hard. BG's been on the program, came on the program last year, and it's my favorite thing right now in Belize. I mean, we focus primarily on permit. That's our focus, just like the permit club. But we do run into all the other species too. Mike's mostly fishing for those. I'm kind of still just focusing 100% on the permit because I'm crazy that way. But we're really excited. You can find all the info on the Yellow Dog website in the catalog. We're super excited to expand it. Actually looking for a new boat right now. When hopefully have a new platform for 2027 for everybody to come down and check out.
How does this mothership platform kind of change the permit equation compared to, say, your traditional lodge setup in Hopkins? I mean, obviously you have the ability to cover a lot more water, which you're doing, and you're probably focusing on different areas throughout the season, right? But as you said, you start in Belize City, and you can go north, south,
anywhere,
run out to the outer atolls.
Yeah, we have a program depending on the weather and where we've been catching fish, previous weeks. It's nice though because we live out on the flats. That's where we live. We're a mobile lodge, so fishing's not good one place. We just move, go to another place. We're the first ones on and the last ones off. That's pretty much, we're still getting up early depending on where we are. It's really nice to just tow the skiffs and go where we want to go and not see a bunch of boats. And I'm a firm believer that this is one of the nicest fly fishing experiences in the Caribbean. I can honestly say that. And I've had clients say that to me too. It's a one-off program, and we're super blessed and super lucky to be running it. And, I invite everybody to come down and check it out. I'd love to have you on the boat. Jim, you got to get down, right? Yeah. I'm sure BG told you had to get down.
Yeah. It's coming.
It's coming. But yeah, I'm excited. It's kind of all I want to do right now is go on that big boat and tow my skiff around Belize and hang out, live the dream.
Well, and it's interesting because there's a lot of lodges in Belize these days.
Yep.
It's pretty well covered geographically, although there are areas in Belize that are still really not being fished by your traditional fixed base lodges.
Nope.
They just don't run there on a given day. There are these pockets of really productive water that aren't being visited or covered by these traditional lodges.
All that information is classified.
Yeah, exactly. But that's a big part of what you guys are focusing on with this liveaboard.
Exactly. Like I said earlier in the podcast, it's like we've totally changed the way that we fish our program. And, I don't like to see other boats. It's a big thing for me, whether I'm in my skiff land-based or I'm on the liveaboard. We like to go where no one else can go, and we like to fish where no one else is. Yeah. And that translates to a lot of less pressure and a lot more fish in the boat.
Yeah. So. Well, we've got all that information, as you just mentioned, on the Yellow Dog website.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're excited to be working with you as we always have since the very beginning.
I've said this before. I always appreciate the opportunities you guys have given us, and we're super blessed to be associated with Yellow Dog.
Oh, we appreciate that, Will. So wrapping this up, let me ask you, if you could go back, let's say 10 years, all right, even before our last podcast together in 2019, and if you could give yourself at that time one piece of advice, one thing that you know now, this hard-earned wisdom, all these years later, what would that piece of advice be?
Don't go permit fishing. I've said it a lot.
Find a different addiction.
Yeah, find something different. Go bass fishing. I don't know. I've been really lucky. It's been a lot of ups, been a lot of downs. I didn't think we were going to make it through COVID. I don't think a lot of people thought they were going to make it through COVID. We did. And, my whole mindset has changed since becoming a dad. And I take it day by day and, pick your battles. You win some, you lose some. The last 10 years we've been really fortunate to keep doing what we're doing. And I don't think I would change anything. I'm in the spot I'm in right now because of the choices I've made and the decisions I've made. And, some you regret and the others you just live with. And it's, honestly, I don't see myself doing anything else. We, as a whole, the business as a whole, has been really, really lucky and blessed. I mean, we've got great people working with me. The partnerships, you guys, partnerships with my sponsors. I've got a great team, whether at the fly shop, the guys in San Pedro, Ariana. I got to give a huge shout out to Magic Mike. I mean, the guy's a legend. I mean, if there was a Belizean Fishing Hall of Fame, he would be in it. I couldn't do what I do without Mike, honestly. So thanks, Magic, for letting me stay home sometimes and you taking the reins a little bit. So
yeah, you guys make a hell of a team.
I love him. He's like my brother.
All right. So I've got some quick last questions. You got to just give us the answer that comes right to mind. Okay. Quick answers to these fast questions. You ready?
My brain's slow, so I might take more than a second, but go ahead.
First thing that comes to mind, one permit myth you wish would die.
One permit myth that I wish would die. They don't eat. Yeah, I wish that would die because they do eat. You just got to do the right things.
Most overrated piece of permit advice that you see out there, whether it's online, social media, it's become like, this is just a given, a piece of permit advice that you think is overrated.
A piece of permit advice that I think is overrated. That's a tough question. Overrated permit advice. Can we go to the next one? Let me think about that.
All right. Yeah. One habit anglers should stop immediately.
For permit fishing, casting right away. Analyze for sure first before you make that cast.
Be patient.
Be patient.
All right. One habit anglers should start immediately for permit.
Cast. Practice your cast. 100%.
Your cast.
It's every day in my boat. It's if you only get your 1 week a year and you're only saltwater fishing 1 week a year, before you go on that 1 week, a month before, you should be out there a couple days a week in the wind, being that weirdo in the park with your hula hoops. I mean, yeah, you're going to just create success for yourself if you're practicing your double haul.
God, it's so weird. Every single guest we have on this podcast says the same thing.
It's like
practice your damn casting.
Practice your casting.
That's right. All right. How about a permit memory that still keeps you up at night?
Oh man. I mean, I remember the ones I've lost more than the ones that I've gotten to hand. I mean, there's been some giants that all over Cuba, Belize, Mexico, Florida. I saw a permit with Jim Barchi in Florida. Jim Barchi from Scott Fly Rods in Florida. I think back in like 2015 or something. I thought it was a shark. It was just a giant. There's been so many, steelhead, GTs. But yeah, that permit memory, that big fish in Florida I saw, never got a shot. It was bad light. It was kind of drizzling. It's one of the biggest permit I've ever seen. I've seen a ton of big permit in Belize but I'd say the ones that haunt me the most are the ones that we've hooked and just lost. you fight them for 45, 50 minutes and they're like right there. And then like the hook straightens out or you bust them off on a piece of coral. I had one. I think about a lot with Bruce, a client of ours, and his, it's great because his wife catches a bunch of fish, and I've always had great perma fishing with Bruce, but he's gotten unlucky a couple times with me where he's hooked a few fish, and it's just like we've had him right there, and then there's that one last sea fan right before the boat, and of course the fish hits that one sea fan. Like I'll be on the back of the bow or back of the tower, and I'm like, hey Bruce, there's that one sea fan. And as soon as I say that, right over the sea fan snaps off. I mean, it's just like I think about those moments a lot, and I kind of laugh about it. It's permit fishing. It's just, but yeah, I definitely those are probably the memories I stay with me a lot, are the ones that I lose. Like, what could we have done better? Always constantly analyzing.
All right, let's go back to the one question you couldn't answer. Most overrated piece of permit advice, and I'll throw an example out there because we talked about it a few minutes ago. And that is the thought that you make a cast, you think it's in there, the fish doesn't eat it, so you immediately bring it in and say, I got to change flies, as opposed to saying, adjust that presentation, adjust that placement, adjust that movement, how you're retrieving the fly, stripping it. That piece of advice of don't be afraid to quickly change flies may be overrated.
Yeah. That's a good one, actually, a really good one. I can't believe I didn't think of that. I would say... back to the tide situation, like I said earlier, I mean, I've been catching a lot of fish on the bottoms of tides lately, and I think that's a lot to do with environmental changes and pressure on the fisheries. I think a lot of those fish maybe aren't coming up on those high tides like they used to. They're they're hearing boat motors, they're hearing pulls on the flats. I would say, a lot of people should start looking on the bottom ends of those tides a lot more. Yeah, they're not always feeding on that high. I mean, they do feed on that high tide, obviously, but in certain situations, you should be looking at the bottom ends too.
There we go. There's a good piece of advice. Yeah. Be open-minded about tides.
Absolutely. Constantly analyzing.
Constantly. Well, we could talk for hours more. We've covered so much great stuff today. It's always great to be able to sit down with you and have these conversations. You are an absolute wealth of information when it comes to permit, and we really appreciate you taking the time to sit with us and have this conversation. This has been great.
Man, Jim, thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it. Thanks for the continued support. And we'll see you guys out on the water.
Well, Will Flack, that pretty much wraps up this episode of Waypoints. If you're dreaming about your next fly fishing adventure, be sure to visit yellowdogflyfishing.com. It's the place to explore destinations, research trips, source the right gear and flies, and stay up to date on everything happening in the world of destination angling. At its core, fly fishing is really about the journey, the places we discover, the people we meet, and the stories we bring home. And of course, the best stories almost always start with a trip. Until next time, keep fishing, keep traveling, and remember, no one ever regretted a life of adventure.
This has been another episode of Waypoints, the podcast of fly fishing travel and adventure angling. Waypoints is produced by Brian Gregson and written by Jim Klug. Music is written and provided by bluegrass legend Woody Platt. Audio engineered by Sean McCormick. Visit yellowdogflyfishing.com for more location profiles, destination information, travel news, and the industry's best selection of flies and equipment for destination angling.